To discuss some of the points, not really summarizing what's been said, but I think like yesterday Retool was saying at the beginning of the conference, in fact, urban design today is in a process of redefinition. And I think after the conference I have the feeling that we can see how rich and intriguing is the urban field today. And also we have seen many many different solutions or approaches that from the urban design, or what sometimes we call today urbanistic design, urbanistic project, the way that the cities can really be improved and be reflected upon this. That's the reason I feel that perhaps in this roundtable, perhaps I was thinking to create some points that, in my eyes, it seems very important just to point out the changing paradigms that we are still suffering. We discovered, and probably I think the conference also is a clear explanation for it. And I think these changing paradigms, in my eyes, it tells a little bit about the new emerging culture into the urbanistic sphere. I think this is really completely, I mean, that in the 20th century probably the city was explained in terms of the machine. Today the machine is not any longer feasible, and probably we have to use other terms, perhaps metaphors, biological metaphors. I mean, there are many other terms that we need after the conference that we have seen these days. The other idea I feel that is very clear, and at least in my eyes, is the idea that when we intervene into the city, we need many different tools. And we saw today and yesterday that sometimes we're talking that to talk about the city, we need to talk about processes, we need to talk about projects, but also about strategies. Yeah? And we need to talk about the designer, but also many more agents. And I think those are the questions I would like very much to address. Another point that I think is very interesting is the idea of complexity, which has been very much a term that's been used. And probably we have today the tools that we can understand better the complexity. And sometimes we feel that the city 50 years ago was less complex. I don't think so. But they don't have the tools for it. And today we have a tool with we can learn, we can understand complexity. That probably sometimes we feel a little bit upset. But I think the people that they were planning the city after the World War II, the complexity was there, but they were unable to read it. I think those are elements that I would like to put on the table. But my suggestion when we were talking before with Mark Tortis and Moya, it was the idea that perhaps I would suggest to the table to put the debate around the idea of the design. Because I feel this is a school of design, the design being present all along the conference, but I think not the design in terms of the project, in terms of a strategy, but I think very much that perhaps should be a good departing point of that. Yeah? And for me, design is mainly not only a question of drawing, it's a question of ideas. And I think this is what we should put, and I'd like to address my first question to Mark, because he's going to leave us sooner. But I think the question of, for me, if we, for instance, we take the example, I think that probably when we're talking about ideas, sometimes it's difficult to explain how, but if you use, for instance, the expression that Aldo Rossi used to say, well, when we do an intervention, we do a project for a city, there is a logical but also an analogical component. Everybody is quite ready to discuss about the functions and the things that they are clear. But about the analogical is not so easy. And sometimes when also this afternoon we were discussing about the way that the public participation can influence into the project, the problem is how the analogical system could enter into the project. Because analogic components, Rossi said, is always something that is difficult to understand. It's sometimes the memory of the place, the way that this place is perceived by the people. I mean, those are the things. I would like perhaps to ask you, Mark, how do you feel about this, the idea, how we can express, or for instance, when you were explaining yesterday with your research and your projects, how this element could be enriched, and how this element could be at the same time rich in terms of the feedback that you were showing yesterday, but how do you feel that that could be part of our process, our learning, but also our way of operating the city?
Well, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Raoul and to Mawson for having organized this amazingly rich conference, maybe also registering the state of the art of the profession. You said rich, multiple, those are the positive terms. The more critical terms would be fractured. There were so many facets that were addressed, interesting facets, and the question is how can we bring it together? And the title of the conference, Conditions and Projections, could be not only applied to the subject matter of the city and the territory that we address, but also to the state of the discipline. So design as a discipline in an Albertian sense, il disegno, this is what we know to do the best, and this is maybe also in the spirit of Aldo Rossi, going beyond the definition of a final product, but also addressing issues of designing processes and designing all the aspects, the analogical aspects that you're addressing that are inherent to the products that we create and produce. Yesterday, a participant in the conference mentioned that we as urban designers were very low on the list. So I'm talking about the role of design as a discipline within our society, and she clearly made the point that we were at the bottom, that real estate developers, economic system, lawyers, etc. Are above us. And this is where we have to become more confident. There's a term in German saying the Selbstbewusstsein. It's an unbelievably German complicated word that addresses many layers. And we have to be assertive and politically fight for the positioning of design within society, and to make sure that we are on top, not at the bottom. I don't want to be at the bottom. Okay? And that's why I liked your reference to the samurais. Okay? And then you either die or you get the girl. And some work needs to be done within the universities to make sure that our presence is felt. So the Graduate School of Design as the most important discipline on campus, this is the vision we should have. And this requires then another form of design. So the placing of the art of making cities, the art of making architecture within society, so the design of how to place that quite high on the list. I give you a very simple example. What are we allowed to design and what are we not allowed to design? This is extremely interesting. For example, anything that has to do with transportation, we are basically out of it. Traffic engineering dictates the modes of operation of how cities currently develop. In Switzerland, over 40,000 roundabouts emerged in the last 15 years. And so you constantly go around in circles, you lose orientation. These roundabouts have destroyed entire villages, and we had nothing to do with it. Okay? I mean, we are designers, we have the landscape designers, part of our faculty. It just happened. So we need to understand the mechanisms at work in the production of these aspects that we are not allowed to design or not allowed to touch, and kidnap them, okay, and make sure that we have something to say about these things. But it also means that we have to become politically active. We have to have representatives within parliaments. We have to have representatives within the UN, and make sure that the engineers are working with us, okay, that we are not in a reverse relationship. We have to make sure that the material scientists are at our disposal. And if we are talking about participation, and if we are talking about multidisciplinary work, we have to have the lead.
Yeah. No, I think this is, no, I fully agree, but we can say that, I don't know what is your feeling, but I feel that, let's say, urban design or urbanist discussion today, vis-a-vis with 20 years ago, is engaging more and more subjects. I think that in a certain way we are gaining, because in a certain way society is accepting that design of the city is not creating growth, it's designing the city, it's improving the city.
Yes.
Yeah? And today, I think, and yesterday, we saw that perhaps there is a Western orientation. We tend to imagine that the problem of the city is not any longer the growth, it's just the improvement of the city. But then we can see, and we saw today, that the cities are still growing. And they are growing in a very generic and banal system. Then I think this is quite important, that still in the discussion at the university, we have to put a lot of attention about the minimalist approach, how we can better design the outskirts of Medellin, or the outskirts of, I don't know where, anywhere, because 50% of the wall is still growing, and growing with the pace that it was never before. Yeah? How do you feel then, and advise about this relationship between what we can call the generic project and the specific project, the project that we sometimes would call the key projects, the project that usually they are architects to make a project, vis-a-vis with the way that the cities are demanding, the normal housing system, no? Even the self-help sometimes. What is your point about that, Mark?
Well, connecting what you're saying to what I was trying to say before, I think we need to retool the discipline and to be aware of the abilities that our discipline has that other disciplines do not have. So we have an abilities, and I hope I do not sound arrogant about it, but I'm humble vis-a-vis those issues. We have the ability to deal with complex and complicated conditions. This is, we have the ability, we are one of the few disciplines that are truly interdisciplinary. This is very clear. We deal with conditions that are dynamic, so it's not only about space, it's also about space and its transformation in time, and within a discipline that is also uncertain, because you don't know where the trajectories will go, so you have to deal with various scenarios, and we have the ability to work with conflict of interests, contradiction, breaks within systems, and to learn from all these aspects and synthesize those into propositions. And this is what I think the term projections also meant. So we have abilities that the others do not have. I mean, if you deal with microbiologists, they have a totally different worldview. And therefore, the Révolution urbaine that Lefebvre anticipated in the 70s has occurred, okay, to the point that we even talking about the new geological era of the Anthropocene. So the planet has been urbanized, and therefore our role is paramount, okay, in order to address the conflicts that are at the horizon.
Thank you very much, Mark. Perhaps I'd like to address to Moyo one question related to your project and mainly to the attitude that you show us today. No? The idea that the role of the design with the community in terms of the project, because sometimes we saw some questions those days that the design of the with the community means to listen the community, but I could see that in your strategy you offer a project, even with alternatives, as a way to create this consensus. I think we can say, and perhaps I feel that I would agree with you, that without a project it's impossible to create consensus. I think that was in your explanation very clear, and I think for me it's something very important. My question will be, how do you feel that this method can go with a very large project and very big cities? Your project could be possible also in a central station in Tokyo. That could be my question.
Yes, I hope. Yeah, I didn't try the central station of Tokyo, but I think, yeah, I believe the making the consensus with people to discuss at first, and then also this is a very important for our society to make a literacy to the discussion in the future. And then also for example, in Japan, the traditional, our community system is very different from the farmer system or samurai system. After World War II, the government decided to follow the U.S. the system to bring to some part of the Japanese government, and then they started to make public building in democracy. But in fact, we have a community, but maybe we don't have a public space. So that has a very big discussion, and still in big frustration in our society. Nobody understands what is a public space, but we can understand the share the space. So I think public is coming from the more individuality, but I feel compare from the Europe or compare from the here. For example, the sharing the space is more coming from the inside to the private, to continue to the some space to share the part. So, and then now after World War II, the government have to give a lot of functional space to the people. So that's why they rush making the building and making the space very, very quickly. But after the result, like my report made in Tokyo, or pet architecture, so this is a kind of concurrent from private space is micro public space, like a pet architecture, and also the made in Tokyo gives a kind of larger scale, but coming from the private system or private company, or sometimes the border, the surface in between the public or larger scale and smaller scale. And then so now I think there is a good moment to start to discuss what is the space for everybody. There is a public or share. So I think it's a very good role of this kind of public project like our Station Plaza, or somewhere in Tokyo Station Plaza maybe. How we can run this kind of project to establish the new goal of the share space from our society. And then in that case, sometimes design can explain or illustrate it to the making what do you say? So what do you say?
The scale. If you feel that can play with the
yes, yeah,
larger scale.
Yeah, larger scale.
And complex agents.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. For example, that some of the sorry, long story. I tried to say. For example, the elderly generation of our, for example, Riken Yamamoto or some other big architect, sometimes they fight to the community, or they fight to the kind of, it's also, they won the competition, but after the competition, the project was cancelled because some of the design not understandable language to the normal people. So, but I don't think not the architecture itself is not so bad, but I think literacy from the people is very somehow the poor or somehow the very difficult to understand of the design. So then in that case, the dialogue or discussion, we can explain our design itself, and also the design. If design are very generous to open the kind of result of the discussion, so we can reach the both sides and we can make a kind of real interface as design from the both sides. And my generation maybe, so I hope we can do something for that point.
Thank you very much. Tordis, perhaps following your point today, I feel that you develop clearly something that I feel is essential in the design of the city, even in the relatively new created city, the relation between the history and the future. I think you did a very good point using the strategies and also the institutions that they make that possible. No? I would like to ask you if you can develop the questions of this conflict that they are always between the people that they want to develop the city and the people they want to conserve the city. So that is the typical contrast that probably, if I remember well, is what Colin Rowe was calling about the people that they are thinking ahead, usually the architects. I think he was recalling the theater of the prophecy against the theater of the memory. What do you feel is the state of the art today? Because sometimes I have the feeling that these discussions are a little bit over and the designers are not any longer taking care of that. What is your feeling of your experience?
I think the big challenge, especially in relationship to design, is how you intervene in the already existing. And alteration, I should say. How do you train that thing and going in and defining what is there and defining qualities, spatial qualities, material qualities and so on, and learning to deal with that and working in some way with the specific. I think that's the kind of big challenge, and that relates in some way to the issue about looking forwards and wanting to have it as it is, or looking forward, or looking to memory. And I think there you can kind of integrate kind of memory in those kind of structures in some way, but not by saving them as kind of, yes they are, but changing them. And that kind of transformation, I think, is extremely the big challenge in some way. And I think that also relates to architecture education and education in how you deal with the urban. Because it's very much, I think the schools now are still kind of structured around the idea that you should kind of learn to do new work. You should present your work in the end, that you are the author of. I mean, that's also how we judge students. I mean, they have to present their work, they have to be ticked off, they've done the things, And there I think it's extremely challenging how you should work with the existing in that sense. So I should see there just a kind of opening up a new field where you train yourself nearly in a iteration process over and over again, going through mapping the existing, working in it, between it, under it, over it. So that I should say is the kind of very challenging in some way. Then I think one should also understand in some way, I mentioned the monument, and understanding the monument itself as being something very, very changing. And going back to Aldo Rossi, who has pointed out the monument as something very, very permanent. Is this the thing who stays in the city as a permanence? And I should say, I really think it's a fantastic description when he talks about the permanence of the city. But I just think one should reverse that. I think the situation is reversed.
Right.
And in some way, the objects that are identified as monuments are the most fragile
Right.
things.
You mean that the permanence can be many different things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Rossi talks also about change. I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
very important. He plays here on a duality, and I believe that we need to register time in the fabric of our cities. It doesn't mean that our cities should become museums, but they should be allowed to transform according to to current needs.
And Ross is really against the museum. I mean, he's very clear with that.
Yes,
I
yes.
mean, it's
Yeah.
like.
But there is another aspect to Rossi that he didn't address is the embedded energy that is and the stock of material that has accumulated in our city. So that takes us now to another discussion on understanding our cities, and we know, for example, that there is more copper embedded within our cities than in the natural environment. So when you begin to think in those terms, then the issue of preservation of materiality within the stock of the city offers you other opportunities to deal with those challenges.
Finally, another question that would be, honestly, listening is the variety of intervention those days. I come across with the idea that perhaps is again time for certain utopian thinking. Considering that perhaps utopia is not something that is a dream. No? Considering that utopia probably we can see that is something that is not real but could be real. And if we take even the most prototypical example like the More, no? the idea that Thomas More was thinking an idea of design of a city, never to be built.
Yes.
But because he had a very powerful project for the city, he was able to change society. I think this is probably an idea that it's something that, listening those days, I would say, well, perhaps it's a moment that with all these changes, perhaps we have to see, well, to try to challenge the models that we are using till yesterday. No? Perhaps, what do you feel about that?
Well,
To the three of you, open.
Sorry.
Please.
The last speaker showed the river in New Jersey. This was a kind of utopian projection, and not necessarily believing that it would be built, but it provoked something.
Right.
And in that respect, the project, the design of a utopian vision for the riverbanks of New Jersey were inserted between the socius and the built environment as a platform to discuss the future state and the future development of the city. So this is where Utopia plays an extremely important role, and we have to develop many utopian visions, and the academia plays an important role in that context.
What do you feel?
I also want to connect it somewhere when you said about the copper in the city, and also thinking through also the cities as a kind of material accumulation. And we had one project where we actually started to think how much does our building weigh?
Yes.
And actually starting looking at them as just a kind of material resource in kind of kilos. And
yes. And they're getting fatter
yeah.
from year to year. That's, I think, very important, because more comes in than goes out.
Yeah.
Momo, any idea about this? Do you feel there is room for the utopian thinking anew?
Yes, after the earthquake, I think people wanted to make a kind of symbol to finding the share or finding the goal. And then, for example, recently Toyo Ito proposed to the kind of apartment block in the tsunami area. It's like a very traditional roof, form, like a metabolism. And then, but he explained it to the people. So because this project was open to the people to discuss that, and he really wanted to ask kind of the historical image or type of the house or genealogy of the building itself. And then, so I think for the sharing, for the making the utopia or thinking the future. So we need some kind of discussion platform sometimes. And I think, yeah, you make a lot of the historical projects, for example, the time issue, how we can bring to the discussion level. So it's this history or old house or old things is very helpful for understanding through the time. And then I think important is also that thinking the time is also very important. Not only the sustainability, more thinking from the old, ancient, into the future. So that this is the long span thinking is also very different idea, makes well, thinking the utopia in the future. So that I hope we can looking for some new symbol.
Maybe the issue of crisis is very important, and Diane mentioned it at lunch. What happened in Japan had an effect on policies in Europe vis-a-vis the use of nuclear power. And Germany and Switzerland were very quick in inventing a scenario that we would not need nuclear power in 2030. Yeah, so this was it provoked something. A scenario was designed that is maybe utopic, but now suddenly there is something. Yeah. But then there are other types of crises. So 9/11 led to a totally different reaction. The US closed its border and lost one of its unbelievably positive cultural phenomena that it was accepting other cultures. So there are these two sides to crisis scenarios.
Thank you. Perhaps if you don't mind, we will open around if you other panelists or people of the audience that like to introduce remarks or questions, please feel free. If you have questions. Please, anybody? Keep that. We have to understand everybody's tired.
Maybe this is not a question, this is some of my thoughts after today's conferences. I think, John, you opened up very nicely, this is about changing the paradigm. I think the idea is I kind of disagree with what Mark was saying, the urban designer needs to lead. I think it's not about we control the project. I think it's really to lead, it's about the leadership, how to change our industry or professional, how to think or work together, or to push for a more integrated service rather than different professionals and work individually on their own silo. Look at Momo's design for the bus terminals. Obviously, from the beginning, you can see his very free form, very idealistic, and then towards the end, it must has a lot of input from transportation planners or traffic engineer, and to make that project real. I think it's very important not to lead a project, but the leadership to influence or educate other professionals like engineers, how they change the way they work. I mean, in reality, some of the mega scale projects, the engineer, it takes much more portion of the project to complete than designers. So it's really how to, starting from the beginning, to let engineer understand where we're coming from. I think that's more important. So when I think about what you're saying, utopia thinking is not about the form. I think it's really about, in the future, how different professionals or different disciplines to work together, appreciate each other's knowledge and understand from each other, and to reach that kind of utopia thinking. That's That's my personal thoughts.
Thank you.
Well, maybe I was too aggressive in proposing this thought, but I'm getting impatient, and I had enough experience in working in groups of conflicting interests, and I've done endless participatory work where everybody pretends to know more than the architect, and everybody's the architect, and using the term design, and going back to the roots of Alberti or Rossi, or I'm interested in the arc of architecture. So the main leadership discipline that has the ability to listen. So I think we have, in participatory process, we have to listen, and we need to synthesize with the necessary authorship and authority that asserts the position of the field. So I don't believe that we should become arrogant. So I'll give you two examples that are contradicting. I participated at a conference recently in Görlitz in East Germany, and I was the only, there were 16 speakers, I was the only architect talking about architecture, and all the others talked about endless participation, and the work that they showed was, from an architectural point of view, not very good. So this is where you have a value system, and you say, well, there was so much participation that at the end the product was not according to the standards that our discipline should aspire to. The other one was a conference in China in which many assertive authors appeared, showing horrible projects. So this was where design was put in a leading position in such a way, but there was no participation whatsoever, but they all looked like Dubai, or like Shanghai, or like Singapore, the type of projects that Michel showed. And I think this is not a type of authorship and leadership and architecture that I would expect from this process.
I have a comment to that, actually. I think one also have to understand participation very much as part of liberal planning. It's also to prepare to get away the protests and to get the project accepted. So I think it has that other side also. I don't think, I mean, it's become like the PC word, participation, and then it's fine. So I think it's much more complex than that. And, one should be a bit.
No, I think perhaps this is the reason that at the beginning we said that perhaps what is important in terms of the design is to be able to make clear what are the concepts, what I said, the ideas. And these ideas can be also, can allow to listen the others, but also to convince the others. I think the question, when you are saying leadership, I understand leadership means to be able to make the ideas true. That means convincing in a democratic society. And that, I think, is what is very important. But I think probably I agree with you, Mark, that said, well, probably urban designers, urbanist architects, they are people that, because they know the space and because they know the way that the agents can fabricate the city, are more prepared to make this synthesis and to dialogue with the others. And I think that is the key point. But probably that allows us to be, I don't know if this leader is at the top or is at the middle, I don't know. I agree that in this room and for our students, we have to ask that we are leading the fabrication of the city, because at least as ambition we have to do. But anyway, we know that later there are others. I mean, we know that. But anyway, I think it's good. More questions? Yeah.
Okay. I was intrigued by the last two lectures were really engaged with the idea of a political project in which design becomes the tool to achieve some goals, or some social goals, like in the case of Alejandro, that are achieved through the design and through this political idea. And when you four were talking about the lack of an ideal, of an utopic imaginary that exists today, there was also lacking in any of the discourse any idea of what is the political project. So it seems that there is a lack of political project into the design discipline, and that's maybe why the discipline is outside of any other circular production of the city.
I think, yeah.
John, John Moncho. I have an observation and I suppose, a serious comment. The observation is that urban design is, it is asserted, claimed, or sometimes demonstrated that good urban design will achieve or help achieve social and political objectives. My comment is that I have welcomed, in a sense today, a relief from the burden of defending that claim, but nevertheless feel that there needs to be a stream of activity in places like this and in the place that I work, and in all of our places, which goes to the root of the performance of a city as a host to its inhabitants. And its inhabitants will be diverse, complex in their expectations, rich and poor, and all of them need to be attended to in our predictions, I hope, of the consequences of a particular configuration of a city or a building. And this is not an adverse comment on the discussion today. It's a very positive comment, which leads me to my serious comment, which is to thank you, and to thank Rahul and Diane and the others who have put together this event with what I feel is a high threshold of expectations from the minds and ideas of those presenting and those questioning, but a very low threshold of participation. To say that something is free and that you don't need to register is, I think, a very generous way of attracting the good minds that you've had to this event. So thank you indeed.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hello, and talking about generosity, I hope the whole conference was is available sometime in the internet or something like that. My name is Maria Sara. I come from Quito, and even though I am a lawyer, and I know people don't like lawyers too much, I come here as a citizen, you know. And to make the story a little bit more complex, I just wanted to inform you that there's a lot of citizen groups all around the world. I'm sure you know, especially Momoyo, that work with them. And Mark mentioned citizen participation, and in the city where I live, Quito, in the capital of Ecuador, we are several groups of citizens, more and more interested in urban design and urbanism, and we are willing to learn. Of course, we will never become designers or architects or anything like that, but I guess one of the things that we have discovered in this process, and the group I am working with has been working for the last 11 months, and we continue to work, we are very eager to learn. So I would have hoped, for example, that a conference like this would have been in a bigger place, and that much more people would be listening, you know, because this is extremely interesting. The cases that all of you presented. And just to let you know that I don't think you should be afraid of having citizens give opinions or ideas. I think the best way to go about it in terms of utopic type of city or territory is to actually win citizens to be in favor of designers. Because actually, for example, in Quito, we are extremely tired of both politicians and speculators, you know, because they are actually what, where is the person, Mr. Rich mentioned, they are actually destroying all the time and then reconstructing. Destroying and reconstructing because of money, you know. So I think you, designers and architects, you have, you can win much more power if you have the citizens besides you, you know, and so I agree with the open source movement.
Thank you.
So thank you.
The last question. Let's Mark. Yeah. Adrian.
No, just a very small, very banal point. But I have to respond to Mark because he was being provocative. Yeah, I mean, about the leadership role of designers, right? Yeah, I mean, I don't buy that at all. And in fact, I mean, from my own experience, have found that if you have an engineer or you have an accountant or a lawyer or whatever, that kind of gets it, that gets the integrative potentiality, that's brilliant, right? As long as they can work the institutional stuff. And in fact, architects or urban designers often, you know, they really struggle, more than engineers and others, to escape the deep confidence about the capacity to intervene in space and to make space malleable. They really struggle. And there's a kind of always this residual spatial reductionism that I find very difficult to work with, you know. So it's, I don't know, I mean, as I say, it's, so I think that kind of field is a lot more open about how leadership is achieved and how does one instill and diffuse the sensibility that I think you're referring to. And in your experience, you know, I completely accept that that designers or architects are kind of able to give that distillation. But just, you know, from my own experience that, yeah, I can't quite buy that yet.
Well, I can understand your experience, but we should not generalize. I mean, we have to, please.
Okay, but I would be willing to negotiate on certain grounds. But I would like, okay, we need to wrap up, I'm hearing that, and my cab is probably waiting outside. So, but on the issue of the citizen, I think the citizen is multiple, first of all. And it's not always a happy family. And you have interests of conflict, a conflict of interests that are played out on the platform of urban design. So the real estate developer is a citizen as well. Yeah, I would treat him as a citizen. Okay? Because if not, I cannot enter in a discourse with him as well. Or the fact that the Minaret initiative passed, okay, was a shock for the elite in Switzerland, that it didn't even go to vote that day. Okay? We have so many referendums, so in that case we thought it would never pass, but it passed, and those were the citizens. Okay? The citizens of the country decided, for many multiple complex reasons, that, you know, they didn't want to support that symbol. Okay? So I support what you said. I'm behind you, but I'm also very suspicious of the complexity of the situation.
But there is this question about the political. No, if not, I think we can say that in general, I think we cannot imagine the design or redesign of the city without a political backing of it. But the question is that only in few cases we can see the experience of Medellin, where you have really a certain strategy, which is backed on in the whole period by a certain political power. But in general, always the city has been a collective project. And then the public sector has to create the control for the collective conditions, even that the city can be done by the privates. But that doesn't mean that it's done only by the privates, that some people sometimes postulated. You know, you remember when in London it was proposed that all the operation of the Docklands, they said, well, this is a free market, only the privates will do that. And that was the exercise, but that fails. Fortunately, but it's clear that that should fail. I mean, there is no other experience like that. Yeah? And that is what reassures, but probably then is when designers, we must be prepared to be able to have a political atmosphere that is backing the project, and then you can go faster, like probably being in Medellin, other places where it's more through the fragments that you can get the redesign of the city, which is what happened, generally speaking, in all the cities. That probably is what happened. Do you want to add something?
And the term polis and politics share the same root, and the term citizen and city share the same root. So this
we pass the word to our chairman too.
Oh my God! Just to thank everyone, and this has really been very intense, and in many ways beyond the intensity, beyond what we expected. And John, I just want to very much thank you for your remarks, and but also to reciprocate a thanks to everyone for this generosity of time, because I think that's what sort of made this, and I think we really appreciate it. It means a lot to the department and to the GST, because it's helping us to also be able to craft our own agendas in ways we've taken stock, and the diversity of opinions that we've heard, as you've all described, has been totally amazing. And thanks to Mohsin for supporting this. It's also, I think one must appreciate the way he has situated many other events which actually build on these questions. And we had a conference a few months ago called The Life of Cities. We've had this major conference, and on the 2nd and 3rd of March, the Ethics of the Urban is another conference that Mohsin is hosting. So I think this agenda takes on many dimensions in the way that, and perspectives it's sort of discussed from, so thanks very much. I must also acknowledge very much Hashem, Joan, Yves, Felipe, and Victor, who really nurtured this project intellectually. I only sent the email out to you, so you guys thought I was the one who was responsible for it, and I gave them my office space. But I think this group really nurtured this project, and I really appreciate the time and the energy they've all spent on it. And then to Gerard and Doug for your stamina. Institutional memory, that's sort of right there, literally and metaphorically, and to Chantal, who has quietly made sure that things work and calmed me down when I couldn't spot Alejandro and was sweating. And so thank you very much for that, Chantal. And really lastly to the audience and the speakers and the panelists who've, I think the chemistries we've generated here are fantastic, and I hope that's something that will continue. So thank you very much.